Right, here we go. Final push. We're saving the best till last. So we've got Paul Horner for you now. Paul qualified in 1997 and has then set up his business in North Somerset. He got his associate in 2012, and 2014 he gained his BSc with honours for the first in Farrier, and also won the Coldwell Cup for the best practical job that year. In 2019 he passed his fellowship with the Worship Company of Farriers, and he's also attended the Tokyo and Paris Olympics, where he was on the International Olympic Committee. In his practice, he mainly shoes event horses, but has a particular interest in remedial work. He's also the resident farrier at the University of Bristol and has been for the last 20 years. Paul Horner.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you to BFBA and Focus for inviting me, and for all of you for holding on to the last here to listen to my presentation. So shoeing the performance horse, really it's a fancy title for the presentation. It's probably what we all do for shoeing all horses, and I'm not going to stand here and give you anything that was going to really change your shoeing plans or some special way of shoeing a horse to really change its performance, but it's more the mindset that I'll go through as a farrier, all the considerations that we should take into account shoeing all horses, but what we're actually trying to achieve. With the shoeing the performance horse, really it's an interest of mine that's come from the family. This is my daughter and her family have always been into show jumping. How I come into shoeing event horses, really I just stumbled across, and now the majority of our work, probably 90%, is event horses. And we're going to talk about how we shoe for different disciplines and the things to take into account. So when you start working with event horses, performance horses, really you're going to join that part of the team. And that's what a lot of this presentation will be about, is working with a team and the different professionals that you'll work with, equine professionals, but also the horse and rider. So the horse and rider will be competing at whatever level and whatever discipline they want to be at. And as us as farriers, we're going to join that team and hopefully just help them get that one place higher on the podium. And that's what we're there to do. We're not there to jump in and change everything and automatically get them up a higher level instantly. We're going to work with them and progress as we go along. And a really good analogy of that is if we revert the horse or the performance they're doing to racing cars, and we all know that Formula One is the pinnacle of that. All the cars and drivers within relativeness are pretty much the same and are competing at the highest level you can. But the ultimate is, if they make that wrong tyre change, we know that we're going to really affect that performance of the car, and they're probably not going to win that race. So for us, it's really important to think about the discipline the horse is doing, the surface that horse is going to be competing on, and what they're expecting off of the footwear of that horse. And if we can put that package together and work with the other professionals, work with the owner and the rider, and gain 1% extra, that might just be enough to push these people up the podium and keep us in favour with the team that we work with. So what are the roles of the farrier in working with these horses? And first of all, do we need new skill sets? Well, first, as farriers in the UK, we're all trained to a really high standard. So I don't feel like we need different skill sets. You don't have to be the better farrier. We have that skill set already. That's what we're trained to do. But it's really important to break down and go through a mindset of different things that we may need. And the first one, which is most important, which we will loosely go over today, but it was a real big part of my presentation yesterday, is assessing the horse. And especially of us working with these horses, we can achieve so much from watching them. And we literally will go every 4 weeks to see these horses. So we probably see the changes in these horses throughout their performing seasons more than anyone else. Once we start to gain all this information, communicating it. And this is probably what farriers aren't quite so good at, that communication bit. So it's important just to take the time, have a cup of tea, and really communicate what we're seeing with people and work with the different professionals. And we go through some ways of how we can do this. We need to be able to identify when something's going wrong and take the time to look at the horses and then be proactive with our outcome. So not just keep those thoughts to ourselves. We need to be well equipped. And these days already, I've had a look around the car park. There's some nice vans out there. And the vans have changed massively in a kit that we carry in them. So it's really changed over the last few years. And we need to be right up to date with I've used modern materials, but synthetic materials, all those new products, because there is so many out there now, and we need to know how they work. So we'll go through all of those products that we might need. But as I said, we'll start with the assessment process. So it's really important when we get to the yards to take the time, watch the horse walk and trot, but also just look at that horse's stance. Does that horse look comfortable, stood how it is? We can pick up so much, as we spoke about yesterday, about the posture of the horse, and also pick up any of those conformational problems. And what we're always looking for is that perfect conformation and that perfect posture. And then we know we're going to have even load through the limbs and through the structures of the horse. But we don't very often see that. So that's why it's important for us to take the time, and then we can adjust our shoeing plan to help these horses. Not only will that reduce the risk of injury, but it's going to prolong the working life of that horse. And the longer we can work with a horse, you actually get to know them and you know how to keep them maintaining. And for us as farriers, obviously, this is where we pick up that asymmetry and lameness, and we can be a real important part of the team that we work with. Once we've got all these information, we need to be able to communicate it. And working with these horses is essential to be able to communicate to keep the well-being of the horse. So communication plays a crucial role when working with these horses. And as I say, we need to involve everyone within the team. I'm going to list a few people in the team, but there's always more involved. We need to take that proactive approach. So we really need to identify and address the potential problems and be one step ahead. So for instance, if we know the ground conditions are changing, we want to jump on that and obviously help these horses before they go sore-footed after a competition. So really be proactive in our approach of it. As I said, monitoring. As farriers, we will generally go 4, 5 or 6 weeks. I like to keep the horses on 4 weeks. Personally, I think 6 weeks is too long on a shoeing cycle. But we're likely to see these horses and assess them every time. Vets maybe every 3 or 4 times a year, and physios 2 or 3 times a year. So actually it's us as farriers which get those eyes on these horses and pick up those problems sooner than most. And then we need to be able to collaborate and work with that team. If we can all work together, inform everyone, then that really does help to make those informed decisions and get that right shoeing plan for the horses. So as I say, I'm sure there's more within the communication process, but for me, this would be the main 4 we work with. But just remember, the horse is always in the middle. We're all there as equine professionals to work around the horse. It's really important to have a good working relationship with the vet and get on well with them. Obviously, they take that lead role, that's why I put them up there. But when they do come up, when they may have done some diagnostics for us or have some x-rays, or they've come up with a shoeing plan that they like, just remember, we did train for 4 years. We're here today, we've walked around, seen all the different products, and there's loads of ways you can apply these products, and they affect the horse in many different ways. So as a farrier, it's really important to put across our skill set and knowledge to the vet and have a discussion, not just accept the fact they want pads and packing on. That's such a massive question, and we can apply the same pad and packing in various different ways. So as we move on to later, we'll talk about the importance of knowing how those products work and what structures they involve. I put in farrier here because we may be that farrier, or there may be a referring farrier. But again, communication is vital. And when these horses arrive maybe from a different yard for us to shoe in the middle of a season, it's important that we do not change the package. We take on board what that horse has and work that communication back, try and get hold of the farrier and speak to them. Because if we're going to go and change that horse that's arrived, the last thing we want in that yard is for everyone to jump on and change everything, and then that horse doesn't perform how it did. So it's important to have that communication with previous farriers, or you may be that previous farrier. Take the proactive step and contact the farrier when that horse is moving to its next yard. As we spoke about yesterday, we can really change the posture and help the conformation of horses. from our shoeing, from the bottom of the horse, and it's very easy for us to change that top line. If we're going to do that, we really need the physios and body workers on board. And nobody really likes it when we get moaned at that the toes have been left long or something's happened. So it's important if we get on well with the team and we've really looked at these horses, and it may be that we're struggling to keep these toes short, they're running away because the horse has changed its posture. If we've got this relationship with the rest of the team, they can alter the top line, help the top line, and we can look after the feet. And it works so much better to keep these horses performing. The owner and rider is one that generally gets missed out. But just by turning up on the Monday morning, having a cup of tea, asking them how they got on the weekend, did their horse perform well, we can get so much back from that. It's important to realise if the owner or rider says, oh, the horse wasn't striking off on the right hind, or I couldn't get it to bend well in its dressage test, and then we see them trot up and we can see some asymmetry in the back or some changing gait, we can start to link all this together. So those early stages, early warnings from the owner or rider are really important to take on board. Now I'm just as busy as everyone shoeing lots of horses all day long, and I don't have time to ring up all these people all the time and have these conversations. So for me, because it is so important with these horses, I just set up a WhatsApp page for the group. I'll add all these people on. So it's me taking the lead. It looks good for me as a business. It looks professional. I add everyone on and I'll just pop on there, looked at whoever today, looked a bit, asymmetric behind, or the toes are running away. And it not only does it help, but it covers ourselves later down the line if we have a problem. So we've got all this information, but it's really important to start to act on it now. So we want to be proactive. And this being proactive really does help us solve problems, but we want to address the problems before they actually arise. So we really want to keep these horses going. And as a farrier, there's only certain bits we can really take control of. And the shoeing cycle is one of them. We arrive to shoe a horse and we're going to take a lot of time and pride in our work, and we're really going to do the best job we can. And if we're really happy with what we do and put on a foot, and then we turn up 6-7 weeks later and it looks like this, all of that hard work's kind of gone out the window. So we know that those last few weeks, they're not going to get the traction that this horse wanted, and you're not going to get any other performance on the shoes that we wanted. So they look like this as well. Not only is it detrimental to the horse, it's, the horse can injure itself on these, but for every 1 centimetre of toe length, you can have 50 kilograms of extra force on your tendons. So you can see how all these bits can really affect the performance of the horse. It's easy for us to suggest the horse goes on 4 weeks. There's always many constraints. But as long as we've suggested these things, we've done our bit. We've been proactive within our team. The next thing is ground conditions. So in the ideal world, this is a perfect ground condition for a horse to work on. But as we know, that doesn't always happen. And we can end up with a bog or deep mud. But we need to be proactive on how we deal with this. So what type of discipline is the horse doing? Is it hunting? Is it eventing, dressage? And all of these things we need to take into account. And maybe that is an event horse that's just coming back into work. So it's going to do a lot of work on the road to get it fit. Or it may be that we're in that controlled environment of a surface. And surfaces are really readily available now. Pretty much every horse will be rode on a surface. And later on, we're going to move on to really how surfaces have changed and how they affect our shoeing every day. The type of shoe we use. The days when we had a concave shoe, unfortunately, are gone. We need a whole selection now, and there can be a whole array of what we need. Do we need stud holes? Do we need a surface shoe? Or are we just trying to reduce weight? This is all the things we need to go through and find out. It's no good just putting any shoe on the horse. As we said back to that Formula One car, we need the right shoe for the right horse. Also, it's really good to plan the events with the owner. Not only is it showing interest and having that bit of PR with the owner, but if somebody's got a really big event, whatever it may be, and it can still be at a lower level, but we need to try and plan those dates in our diary, get those shoeing cycles sorted, because there's nothing worse than them turning up to their big event that they worked for all year and they go, oh, we lost a shoe. it was on 6-7 weeks, but that helps if we can kind of talk them through and get this booked in. Or they turn around and say, I'm doing badminton tomorrow, can you please come and shoe the horse? So it's important that we play a role in that part as well. And also, as we said, working as a team, the lameness problems, working with the vet, we can start to discuss these problems with the team before we get to that lameness and hopefully keep the horse performing. Now, to be able to do all this, we're quite lucky these days. When I started shoeing horses, in the back of my van, I had a forge, an anvil, and a couple of pairs of shoes. And that was about what most people had. And as I said, it was nice to jump out earlier and see some of the vans and see the equipment that people have in the vans. Most people have welders, various different types of shoes, welding inserts, and again, all the synthetic materials. We also have drills and grinders, and there's various different stuff we can do to adjust our shoeing plan for these horses. So as we say, one type of shoe these days, I feel does an injustice to the horse. We need all those different variations depending on the surface it's going to work on. By having these, it means we can deal with whatever situation there is. So if the other equine professionals are on the yard and we've gone to talk about shoeing a certain horse, we don't have to go away and come back. We can deal with that horse, put any shoeing package on it immediately. And that's really important because it saves us time and money as well, but the outcome for the horse is dealt with much quicker. So as we said, those tools really give that timely, efficient in shoeing, and it gives the best care for the horse, but also addresses the issues as they arise and they're done when we leave the yard. Modern materials, synthetic materials, whatever we want to call them, is such a massive part of shoeing horses. I don't think there's one day that goes by where I don't use a modern material. But this package here would be very popular with most people now. That's our modern materials, or it can be something much more complex. But when we're using these products, it's really important to understand what they do. And I use them to maintain or regain soundness, which sounds a bit counterintuitive. But if you think about, as we said, ground conditions changing, we may add some packing to keep those soft-footed horses, those thin-soled horses, galloping over the hard ground. Or maybe that horses have gone lame and we've worked with the vets and we're using some package to regain that soundness. We can use them to raise feet, stick on extensions, stick on crack plates, or even stick on the shoes themselves in various different ways. But to use any of these products, we really need to know the essential knowledge. When we're going to load an area, what are we actually going to load? How are we going to transfer that weight across the foot? And how are they going to change the dynamics of the horse? Will it change it in a dynamic or a static stage? For instance, if we fill a foot right to the ground with sole pack and those paw impacts, that's fine when they're walking along, but it will really change the dynamics of the horse when you start galloping. And it may be that it puts too much pressure on the sole, or it may even come out. So it's really important that you understand at the different phases how you affect the horse using these products. And if it is going to affect the conformation, some of these products really add some weight to the foot, and if they've got some deviations, you can really see how it exaggerates the deviations when you add the weight to the bottom of the limb. The main materials we've probably all got in our van, I definitely do in mine now, acrylics, so that's what we glue our shoes on with, or maybe do some extensions, J-Meg, Fur Millennium, Glue U. There's various different products out there, but they're all methyl macrylates. They're all that family of glues, and they're a really strong glue, which is, I really like using those, probably more than the polymers, but they all have their places. The polymers are there are normal brands, there's lots, but the good thing with them is we can see there's a sole pack here, or maybe an extension, or a little synthetic shoe here, but they come in different hardnesses, and that's the importance of these. They come in their different hardnesses, so we can do various different jobs with them. Thermoplastics, we have our imprints and our sole pads. The big one now is impression materials. I think most people would use impression material, but we're going to move on to talk about that because impression material has taken the way over sole pack, but there's a real difference between the two, and I want to touch on that when we go through this. So our polymers, as we said, two-part product, we mix 50-50. and they go off really fast. So this is great when we're dealing with foals and young stock. You can put extensions on really quick and probably don't need them sedated because they go off so quick. So they have their places with different types of conditions they're trying to deal with. They're non-toxic and don't give off fumes. And as we say, the good thing is they come in different hardnesses, so we can do different jobs with them. The one downside is they're really susceptible to moisture. So if you leave any moisture in the hoof wall, as they're going off and heating up, they give off some gas and the products will fail and they'll come off in the shorter term, which is annoying for us. And obviously they're not doing the job for the horse. So they are susceptible to moisture. As we spoke about earlier, with discussing with the vet when they ask for certain packages, if they ask for pads and packing, we're going to use this as a prime example here. So this is the same product. They do come in different hardnesses. Generally, the soft pack goes under a pad, but you can use it as we have here. You can see this first foot. We've actually put the sole pack in and set it down away from the ground quite away. This horse had a deep digital flexor tendon tear directly over the navicular bone. So if we're going to add any packing directly on that, it's going to cause pressure and pain to the horse, which we don't want. But we do want to take out a bit of that force through the limb, and we also want to add just a slight bit of comfort for it. So we've added a very low bit of packing. You can see here at the top, this is right to the ground surface. This really wouldn't benefit a horse with a deep flexor injury, but this horse was arthritic and benefited from that stabilization, that anti-concussion, and that spread the weight right across the foot. You can also use it like down in the bottom corner here. This is like a thoroughbred foot, so it had that fleshy, soft sole, but we wanted some fog pressure for this horse. So we can set down around the sole and add that fog pressure on here. So just taking that as an example, you can see we need to add as farriers our skill sets. This is various different ways, just one product we can use, and there's more you could use. We really need to discuss that with the vets when we're working with them. Once we get to acrylics, again, two-part products. I generally like to mix them by hand because the nozzles are normally a bit longer and I don't like to waste it. But it was really interesting watching over in the demo area earlier. They were saying by the time they'd gone through the nozzles, they've mixed 1,600 times or something, whereas when we're just mixing with our hand, there's not as many. So it gives it a really consistent thing using the nozzles, and you also don't get any contaminants into it. In saying that, like I said, I've always used a piece of cardboard in my spatula and got on well with it. The downside is they give off a real strong odor, apart from the new one, which is out on the market at the moment. And you really do need to be mindful of this. Be outside and make sure you don't chuck the old cups or whatever you use in your van. Make sure you clear out all the products because these are hazardous to our respiratory system and to our eyes and hands. So yeah, careful with those ones. They have a slower set time, about 6 minutes. And I actually quite like this. So it gives me time to think about what I'm doing. You can sculpt them, mold the product, and do a lot with it. And the good thing is they cope really well with moisture. So if we think about when we apply an imprint shoe, you take the shoe out of the water, you already have the glue on the foot, or you put it on the tab, whichever way. There's still moisture on there, and these glues will cope really well with it. Some of the more common ones on the market, and for me, the main reason I'd use them is for gluing on shoes, and the top picture here is direct gluing. So we've directly glued that shoe straight to the bottom of the foot, and those shoes don't come off, they stay on really, really well. Or indirect shoeing, as we can see at the bottom, so it indirectly glued to the foot via a tab on the shoe. And these products work really, really well. If they do fail, it's generally down to us as farriers as not prepped the foot properly. So impression material. As we were saying, the impression materials have really taken over. The difference with the sole pack, which I forgot to mention, was that the important part with those, with our polymers, the Aquapacks, is when we clean the foot and heat the foot up, they adhere to the foot. So they stick to that foot and hold the whole back of the foot together, and they act like a Band-Aid. And they really does make a difference to those feet. It stops them expanding, especially if you've got flat underrun heels. They work far better than the impression materials. And the impression materials, if you're not careful, can put too much pressure on. They still allow the expansion of the foot. So there's plus and minuses, but we still need to keep those polymers in our van because they have their different values to use. So they come as a 50-50 product, and cure time is really quick. And if you've been using it this year, what with the nice summer we've had, just about managed to get 2 nails in and put that foot down and they've gone off. So it's slowed down again now. There's a real difference in the cure time just with a slight temperature change. This made a difference to the shoeing, so just a bit cautious of when you put that foot down. Some horses we keep the feet up and let it go off, depending on what we want, again what structures we're trying to use. Some we put that foot down as soon as we can and let the horse weight bear on it. They're good, they're non-toxic, and they come in different shore ratings, different hardnesses. So for instance, if you're trying to add or load share on a horse, add a bit of support, I go for something slightly harder. But if you've got a horse which the foot doesn't warrant that, it can't take those soft soles or fur body, we can really reduce that shore rating and help that horse. They work well under bar shoes and pads, but they're really there to load share, to shock absorb and support the structures from above. So we've been through most stuff in the van, the way we deal with it, but we ultimately get down to the shoes. So for me, this is the basic selection of shoes I need in my van. So your normal kind of shoe, you can add stud holes, lightweight shoes to reduce the weight, and a surface shoe. This would be the basic that we'd have. But then we have all of our inserts. So it's really easy for us to adjust any shoe when we get there. As we said, we have the welders in the van, so we can deal with anything in a timely, effective manner if there's any injuries or the horse needs a bit of support in any way. But how do we go about choosing the shoe for that type of horse? So for me, it's down to the discipline the horse does and down to the surface. So we're just going to run through some of the disciplines. And as I said, for me, we shoe mainly event horses, and I have to shoe them in my mind for the cross country. That's when they're at their fastest work. That's when the horse is really going to get tired and it can be dangerous. It's really important to add a shoe that provides good grip and have good stud hole placement. We don't want them too far back, the stud holes, because they're going to catch them and knock the shoes off. We don't want them too far forward because they're really going to change the landing pattern of that horse. So it's really important to take all this into account. When we come to show jumping, 99% of show jumping in the UK now is on a surface. So we want a horse which is going to give support and it's going to give that load, allow the horse to really get his limbs under it and take off, which we're going to see some photos of in a bit, but also feel stable when it comes down to land. This comes down mainly to the surface, which we'll move on to. It's important to understand what surface these horses will be moving on. With dressage, again, we have a similar shoe to the show jumping, may have a bit more length and a bit more support. But what we're trying to achieve with these shoes, again, is stability, so the horse can push on, do its work, but also we want that slight bit of slip. So we want these feet, you can see this foreleg right out. We don't want to stop the action of that horse. They've worked hard for them to really extend their action. So when these shoes come in, they'll slip on the surface slightly and just continue that action. So you get those extra few points in their dressage marks that they're after. And that's down to the shoe and the reaction with the surface. I also look after Avon and Somerset Police, and this is them out in Bristol in the riots a couple of years ago. And okay, we think they're not a performance horse, but this is the performance of that horse. And they go around, gallop around the roads of Bristol in certain situations. So we have to take into account the wear of the shoes and also the grip of the shoes. And it's just as important for these horses which are doing a job as it is for all the others with the different performances that they go through. So you can see I've taken into account the different disciplines a horse does, and then we need to apply that to the different surfaces. As we said with the police horses, they'll be working on the tarmac, on the roads, and nearly all of their work is done on the roads. This is the ideal, the grass up in the top corner, and circuses try to mimic that ideal, perfect soil and grass conditions. It's held together by the grass and the roots, and you have that nice bit of cut in it. And that's the perfect conditions. When we see the sand here, this is uncontrollable. It's all over, it causes fatigue and strain. And the same with the rutted, wet mud. So it's trying to work out what conditions a horse will be on, and then we can have those different shoes. This is much easier for us as a farrier if we understand what type of surface it is, because it's a controlled environment. So then we really know how that horse is going to work. So when we start to look at surfaces, surfaces are made up of 98% sand. Now, if we take that nice wet sand down by the sea and we're to gallop along there, it's really hard, and that's going to give concussion to the horses. When we move up to that nice soft sand, if we pushed our fingers into it, that sand will move away from our fingers. But if we punch it hard, you're going to get some real concussion back from that. So we need to have a nice stable surface, somewhere in between that dry sand at the top, somewhere up from the wet sand down the bottom. We don't want concussion, and we don't want that sand to push away as the horse is trying to perform on it. And to do that, they add in rubber, wax, and different fibers. And that's how they bind it all together. They also need it to drain as well. So they add the fibers to bind it all together and give that stability to the sand, so the horse can sit on top of it and push off. And that will stop the sand pushing away with the weight of the horse above it. They'll add some rubber, which will give some performance to the surface. We want to see the horses come up off of the surface rather than that deep sand where they get sucked into it and get fatigue as they're working on it. And then in the UK, we use wax. The rest of the world doesn't use so much wax, but wax acts as a water, and it kind of binds it all together and again helps to stabilize that surface. There's two ways of watering. You can water from on top of the surface, which is obviously cheap. And when we're in Paris Olympics, they were watering from underneath, so an irrigation system. And in the day, it was baking hot, and the moisture would be kept at 24% from underneath. And then at night, we had thunder and lightning, and everywhere was flooded. And it would draw that moisture, that water, straight back through the surface and constantly keep that surface at 24%. And that allowed that perfect surface for the horses to compete on. So if they're going to go for all of this and make that perfect surface, it's important that we get the right shoe underneath that horse. And that goes right back to the start with these Formula One cars, have the right tile. And so it's really important. And remember, we're trying to gain just 1% difference for these riders and horses. The graders that they use, there's so much research gone into these. And graders are there to level, but also to mix the surface. And this alters the compaction rate depending whether we're doing show jumping or dressage. So do we really want to be sat on top of the surface, which we move on to for show jumping, or do we want that slight bit of slip with the shoe when we got dressage horses? There's even research done on the linkage of these graders, so they should be on a ball hitch, so when the tractors go around corners, it actually drives around the corner, rather than a 3-point linkage, which will push the grade around. And then on all the corners, we have a different compaction rate to the middle of the surface. And the rollers nowadays are split 50-50, so the outer roller will go fast around the corners. So there's a lot of research gone into just the surface, so we need to make sure we've got that right package on those horses' feet. So I'm just going to break it down into dressage and show jumping, because for me, these are the two that really make a difference on surfaces. And we're first of all going to look at this horse here. And we're going to watch this. This was a horse warming up at Paris Olympics. And it's just going through some different stance phases, so some different strides. And I just want you to think about that surface. The horse needs to be sat on top of the surface with his shoe sat level, giving stabilization. As the horse really pushes off, it's not going to drop backwards or forwards or left or right. We're not going to have any of that movement. The horse is going to feel stable on there. But when it actually extends, it's just going to slide and allow that movement to really extend and finish. So just take that into account as you see this horse working on top of the surface. You can really start to understand what we're expecting from a surface and what we're expecting from our shoes. Now, when we move on to the show jumping, they would then alter the surface, and the surface will be rolled slightly harder than for dressage, because they really want these horses on top now. So we're going to see a horse come in from the left-hand side of the screen, and it's just as it gets to the fence, it's going to put its hind legs right underneath it. And it's at that point that we need this surface to be stable. We don't want the surface to move in any way, because you'll see how the horse really sits down on its back end and pushes up. And then as it lands over a huge fence, you'll see that the feet dig in and the surface really doesn't move. So we need the stability from the surface, but also from our shoes. So now you'll see the hind legs come in. So we can really see how the surface has the performance to hold the horse stable, but also a slight bit of rebound with the rubber, and the fibers have stabilized it. So we spoke about different shoes, different performances, different surfaces, and we're going to move slightly on to the shoeing. So I've got a series of pictures here, and I've actually shod this horse, and then I've just taken the shoes off and added different pads and packing just to talk about and discuss how we go. And then right towards the end, we're going to see some gait analysis of the differences between the two. So this is one of our horses, ready to be shod, probably overdue because it's one of ours, so always gets dragged on a bit longer. And then straight after, we've shod it. So we're just shoeing around that coffin joint, so that 50-50 from the back of the foot to the center, from center to the front. And this is what we spoke about in detail yesterday, shoeing around the coffin joint. So we can see we're always trying to work around these reference points. But if we come to the back of the foot here, we can really see when we look at the bulbs of the heel how we've moved this whole foot back. And as we said, for every 1 centimeter of toe length is an extra 50 kilograms of weight on the tendons. So you can see we probably saved a bit of tension on those tendons, but also been proactive with our shoeing, trying to regain that 50-50. We then took that shoe off and applied a pad, nice pad, they're relatively cheap, everyone's probably used them, so we use them a lot, put some dented impression material under, and we've got some hoofbeat footage of these, but we put those on, going to support the back of the foot, it's going to lift the back of the foot slightly, and it's surprising how much a flat pad will really alter a HPA and really just carry a couple of degrees of change on that P3. And then we have this here. So same package, effectively. But if we were going to go on a surface now with this, this will dig in slightly, and this will sit slightly better on top. So we have exactly the same thing, but actually, if we're only after 1% performance better, we may have that just from choosing the right pad. Just to add into the mix, this down the end, the 3D pad is effectively the same as this one, but now we've allowed, because we have an open toe, we've allowed the toe to sink in on the surface. So we've increased rotation of the P3 just slightly more. So these 3 packages effectively look the same, and this is what we come to about speaking to the vets, what exactly they want and what are they trying to achieve, because we can really alter the performance of a horse and the angles of the joints just from maybe a different product or the same similar product but a different manufacturer. And then to really throw something into the mix, there's this. So imagine the difference this is going to make on a surface in comparison to all those others. So when we talk about pads and packing, it's really important to understand how they all work. Now, gait analysis, I don't think you have to have this to shoe horses, but I've gone on board with and bought hoof beats, Workman Black, and it's really good just to have as a reference point for me. So if we have new horses come on a yard, I'll get a reading. If we do have a problem, then we have a reference point to go back to if we do any referral work. But sometimes it's just quite interesting to see the results. And I'm just going to run through a couple of those to show you how we can adjust the stride length of a horse. Equinosis Q, this is more of a vet system, and this measures the vertical movement of the torso, so up and down of the torso, and it'll also tell you whether the horse is lame on the landing or the push-off phase. So it's a really clever piece of equipment that vets will have out and about on the rounds. And Slipe is kind of the new one, which they'll video with their phones, and it sends a video straight off, and AI will give you the information back of where that horse is lame and what's happening. The only downside with this is it may take a minute or two to come back, whereas Equinosis Q is immediate. But you have to put sensors on the horse with Equinosis, so there's swings and roundabouts. But I think all these gait analysis things are slowly coming in, and all of these things in modern farriery is worth embracing. So this is that horse of ours, which I said we just shod and then added on the pads. So straight away when we trotted the horse up, this is pre-shod. So on the top there, we have the left 4, and on the bottom, we have left 4 again. So it's pre and post shoeing, just so we know where we are. And you can see immediately after shoeing, I've gained 2 centimeters of stride length. So that's just by trimming that foot and applying the shoe, being a bit proactive, using the grinder to take that toe off. And I've extended my stride length of that horse by 2 centimeters. You can see we haven't changed the arc of the foot at all. It's just literally by reducing that toe, we've gained 2 centimeters of length. So there we have post shoeing, but now we have the 3rd Millennium Christmas tree pads with some packing. And again, because of the weight, but also that fog plate, we've just lifted that foot up slightly. I've now gained another 2 centimeters. So, but I have raised my arc of the flight by 2 centimeters, mainly because of the weight that we've included. So the weight is exaggerated like a pendulum, and that's why it's really important to take into account what we're doing on the bottom of the horse's foot. This one I just thrown in the mix just to show how gait analysis works. So this is pre-shod on the top, so we have left 4, but pre-shod, and then post-shod, but using aluminium shoes. So by adding aluminium shoes, rather than increasing our stride length once we shod the horse, we've reduced it by 3 centimeters. So after we've shod it with aluminium shoes, we've reduced our stride length. So if we were going to shoe a dressage horse, potentially this isn't the way to go about it with some aluminium shoes. And also we've reduced, you can see, by 5 centimeters that arc. So if we're after a really nice action from the horse and a long flowing stride, by putting the aluminium shoes on, we've really reduced all of this, which I think we quite know. That's why we put the aluminium shoes on show ponies. We want that low daisy cutting action, but this just highlights what gait analysis can show us. Okay, so in my summary, important part, which is with any shoeing of the horse as we started, is the assessment of the horse. It's really important to take time to walk around and assess the horse and take in all this information as we went through yesterday. But then it's important to communicate it and be part of that team and work with everyone around you to get the best results. It's great now to walk around and see some of the van setups, as we said, and all the modern materials and shoe selections that we have within there. Always be proactive. So when we see some slight changes in the horse's feet, go back to that communication process and just reiterate what we're seeing. And remember the difference that surfaces are having and how our shoes and our setup of our feet can really affect the movement of the horse. And if you get to use some gait analysis, great. I think that's going to be the way forward in things to come. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you, Paul. Another superb lecture. Have we got a question for Paul?
Thanks, Paul. With the breakover front and behind, when you're working on your eventers, when you're working on your dressage, are you differentiating between your front and behind shoes? Are you saving your toes behind, or are you trying to get that extra length?
Yeah, so with the front feet, it's always the question to break over behind first. But with the front feet, I'm always trying to just shoe around that coffin joint. And as we mentioned yesterday, and Andrew mentioned his lecture earlier, trying to achieve that 50-50 dorso-palm around your coffin joint. Is it achievable? You know, some horses it is, some it isn't, but we have to have a guideline, and it's a good guideline for me. And I will add that toe variant on, similar to what Andrew was saying, if we want to bring that back. Behind, I always think it's nice just to save the shoes, especially in fast work, but I'm not sure they break over. There's research is still there, but I don't know whether anyone knows that answer yet.
Hi, Paul. With studs, some of the show jumpers, and I do, will, sometimes they're show jumping on the grass, and sometimes they're show jumping on an arena. Would you wash your feeling on studs when they're on an arena? Because obviously you would have a lot of grip in your arena anyway. Whereas when they're Master West, they're jumping on the grass, it's more slippery.
Yeah, so first of all, it's shoe selection. So you're right, you need to know what they're working on. It makes it quite difficult these days because there's so little show jumping on grass. You're going to shoe a horse for a surface and then it's got one show on grass. So it's important to know how important that is for them and what size of class it is to them. And it may be that you need to go for a normal kind of concave shoe while still on grass to give that grip and then add your stud holes. Or if it's just a one-off, they might decide they're going to go with a nice surface shoe and you're just going to have some stud holes. I think the surfaces these days are that responsive. You don't need studs on a surface. And that they should have that cut, but not always are they looked after or managed, as we spoke about in what I just went through. Obviously, most of that knowledge comes from working at places like the Olympics and that, and really working with those horses. But as we know, when we turn up to some yards, they might be 2 foot up the sides of the arena, and obviously everything we've just gone through kind of goes out the window a little bit. But we have to have some guidelines and go from somewhere. But yeah, I'd always go with the shoe that fits the surface, and add those studs for that. And I wouldn't use studs on the arena, but so.
Anyone else?
How do you go about, and what advice would you give when you don't have confidence in one of the team members around the horse?
There's a question. I think we're all professionals. We have to do what we do. I think that the use of that WhatsApp group that has helped me no end. We always, well, not always, but we don't like to be shot down by other professionals, which does happen, as we know. So if we can put stuff on there, as you say, be proactive, that's why I kind of put that bit in, and communicate on those WhatsApp groups. As long as we've put what we feel we should do or what we've noticed, we're kind of hopefully one step ahead of that team member that doesn't want to play team. And that generally, I find they end up shooting themselves in the foot, and hopefully we've covered our backs and end up looking good in that situation. But it's always difficult. And I think that's why it's so important for us to take the role and really be that professional when working with these horses in that team.
When earlier you were talking about using impression material, and when you would hold the foot up longer than put it down, what examples would you give for each?
Well, I think some horses, if you've got a really good, strong foot, you can afford to put some more pressure on. So if I'm trying to achieve a higher heel angle or change the rotation of that P3 within the hoof capsule, some horses, they're a bit more, they have a soft sole or they're weak seat of corn, and you don't really want to add too much pressure on. So then we'll let the horse load and squeeze some of that impression material out. Even the same, it goes down to the sole packs, how you apply them. But sometimes you've got a really good, strong foot, you can apply some pressure there and you can leave that foot up and then let it go off. But most of the times we'll allow horses to stand into them. So the product's only there just to load share, not to actually add pressure to the foot.
One more question, anyone? Are we done? Well, can we give Paul a round of applause, please?